If she were a human, Pearl would be a young adult. But in car years, she's lived a lifetime. Pearl came to our family when we had 3 children in about 3 years. We needed a vehicle where 3 car seats would fit right in a row in the back, and Pearl was the answer. Over 200,000 miles later, those same 3 children have graduated from car seats to the driver's seat. And they share Pearl to get them to their college classes and to work and on social outings with their friends. Pearl shows her age by now, as you might guess. Like me, when she gets up in the morning, she's a little creaky and slow to get going. Her ceiling is stapled up so that it doesn't again fall on the driver and blind them. Her radio hasn't worked for years, except occasionally when you go over a bump. One day I was driving down A Street and I thought I heard a gunshot. I pulled over a few blocks later to figure out what had happened and discovered that her trunk spring had broken off into the trunk. We looked into getting it fixed, but they don't make the part anymore. And they told us we could go to a salvage yard to try to find one, but we decided we didn't really need to be able to prop the trunk open. Also, her remote locks haven't worked for a long time. But that's not a big deal because just like in the olden days, we can put the key in the keyhole and turn it to get into the car, right? So Pearl has taught us a lot about not needing the bells and whistles, right? As long as she gets us from point A to point B, that's all we really need. So we weren't all that surprised when our oldest daughter, Madeline, called on the Friday of Memorial Day weekend to report that she was going from one job to the other job, and she couldn't get the key to turn in the keyhole to get into the car. Well, she thought maybe after all those years on the road, that keyhole just needed to be cleaned out a little bit. So she used the end of a pen to kind of clean that out, and it broke off into the keyhole. And so it was not turning at all. Her sister Catherine came to her rescue with a different vehicle, and she got to work. And meanwhile, I thought, well, maybe it's like when you restart your computer and walk away. When you come back, it'll be fine, right? I was hopeful. But she came back and she couldn't even get the key in the hole. I called our son Peter, who had an extra key. I thought maybe it's a key problem. So I picked him up in my car and we went over and tried that key. It didn't work either. And so we thought about it a little bit. The car was parked in a meter spot and it was Memorial Day weekend. We couldn't leave it there all weekend. And we knew it would take a while to get it in for a repair. So we just needed to get it to a safe place. We didn't want to call a tow truck because it drove fine. We just couldn't get in. So we started thinking about it. The key did work to open the trunk. So we pulled that open and started looking around. And there's that magic hole that exists between the trunk and the back seat. You know, the one you can push down and then you have a cup holder in the back seat, or you have a pair of skis and you need a hole to fit those through. Push that down. Madeline's pretty slim, so I held the trunk open because, you know, it won't stay up by itself because the spring is broken. Madeline crawled in and put her arm through and her shoulder, and that was as far as she could get. So she reached. I held the trunk. Peter stood by the window coaching her because she couldn't really see what she was doing. Just a little bit further, to the right, to the left. Okay, come on, you're almost there. She couldn't reach. And she thought, well, my legs are longer than my arms. If I take off my shoes and socks, I could reach with my toes and grab the lock. So she did that, but her legs weren't quite long enough either. Well, she was wearing nice work pants. Peter was wearing athletic shorts, and his legs are longer than hers. So he said, maybe I should try. I've got a little more flexibility with wearing shorts. My legs are longer. So in he went. Madeline held the trunk open. I coached from the window, but he couldn't reach either. Well, I couldn't not try. So off went my shoes, and into the trunk I went, trusting my life with Peter, holding it open. And between laughter and involuntary bodily sounds, I reached with my toes too, but they didn't reach either. As I emerged from the trunk, I noticed that there were people on the bike trail nearby, looking curiously, probably wondering if they were witnessing an abduction, or possibly a car break-in, which they kind of were. And so I made sure to smile and wave crazily. Nothing to see here, everything's fine. And then we decided that we needed to move on to the MacGyver portion of our project. What tools do we have here that could make this work? We looked around, and of course the first thing we saw was that broken trunk spring that still sits in the bed of the trunk. It's just a long metal pole with a curve on the end. So Madeline climbed back in and tried to reach with that, and it actually reached the lock, but there was no way to grab it to pull it up, so that didn't work. Being the good mom that I am, I did have a ponytail holder in my pocket, so we wrapped that around the end, thinking that maybe that would be enough to be able to grab the lock and pull it up. But we couldn't figure out how to get it on there and to hold, so that didn't work. Looking around, I spotted the bright orange tourniquet I had received in a first aid class recently. It had really strong Velcro, and it could wrap tightly around a limb or whatever you might need. So we tried that, but we couldn't figure out how to reach it all the way over there and affix it to the lock, so that wasn't gonna work either. And then I could almost see a light bulb forming above Madeline's head as she exclaimed, "My shoelace!" She dove to the ground. She pulled the shoelace out of her sneaker. She affixed the end of it into the kind of knot that if you pull on the long end, it's going to tighten a little bit. She climbed back into the trunk, and she turned that into a lasso. I held the trunk open. Peter coached from the window. "Oh, almost got it. Keep trying." She tried and tried, and she got it. She pulled ever so slightly, and it hooked on. But she didn't have the right angle to be able to lift it up. Oh, we were so close. And then I thought, hey, we're Midwesterners, we always have an ice scraper in the car, right? It's May, but you never know. We had the long kind that has a brush on one end and a flat edge on the other. I handed that to Madeline. She held onto the brush end and put the flat end against that lock, against the knot on the lock, and pushed it up very carefully, and it popped up. Oh, it was a miracle. So Peter flew that door open, climbed in, unlocked all the doors. We drove it safely home, parked it in the garage until we could get it fixed. And Peter wisely suggested we put the back seat down so that if we accidentally locked the door again, we could simply crawl through. And we were just so proud of ourselves. You know, we did not give up on Pearl, just like she has not given up on us all these years. Never say never to a family of resourceful optimists.
Yeah.
Thank you.